Royatsan do Namge Londa de Reserve Babjushin do Nyondo, Shesum Badars. Then Siba comes from the Dwar to Snand, comes from Snamido. Oh, and the Sama Koya Nelly Longela Soba, the Sama Sigara. Susum Midaba, Kokichi in Dure, Midavares. Don't get in a shitty. Tanda Mena, Tanda Lubritu Jungiore, Yalubritu Yandu Kava Son, the Kava Maso Chamevere. Don't get in the dust, Javatangaba. Sisum Mida, don't get in the dust.
Sisum Mida, Namkitrin.
Don't get in the dust, Donga.
Oh, Donga. So it's stated in Sutra that we'll do the lines of the verse one by one here. That the three worlds, maybe we can say, the three worlds are impermanent, like an autumn cloud. So here we're talking about the three realms of existence. And all the objects within them, that means places and the bodies and all the resources are all impermanent, and it's like a changing, constantly changing, like an autumn cloud, where an autumn cloud comes seems to come out of nowhere, and then disappears without a trace.
No, Luburdu Jungshkeo. Hadam Midawa Yadakarino, Luburtu Chikio Gore, Taniako Kavanduania, Luburtu, Jigduara, don't get to Benashin rest.
So it's that all the beings of the world come into existence, so that it seems like suddenly or abruptly, and then they also leave abruptly.
Duetici Kalatata Sus. Tadwari Dunal Kashemiliki, Yavalki, Tanduliki, Yahadeneshi, Yashandaziliki, Yahadeneshi, Shandaziliki to the Dueticis Namidu, Kialaya, the Pumbu Sarvalaya, the Pumbu Nimba Doriade. And the Gatavanashi is or Kalatata Sun. Tandako Miliori, Anyaval Shinsasu, Yadin, Tandulep, Yamelicaso, Stokon the Gatam Ganashis, or the Gatabin Damil Chicken, Yasha that said in the Chagora.
And then the
Kalatata Sus and the Gatavanashi, the Chibarishas.
So then they take life, the beings take life, one life after the other, like an actor on the stage. That sometimes reborn as a hell being, then sometimes as an animal, sometimes as a deity, sometimes as a human being. It's like an actor playing different roles on the stage.
Namgelo this. Gets a dear Cotsediago, Namgelo Neshiko Yaji, gets a dear Korangangipan Jigdo Geshe. Oh, Tinashi, Risa with Bachunashi, Keji Madusha, Baba, Sogidoge, oh, Mitapare Songua. Namgelo, the reserve Baptishin to New York.
So they go quickly, like a flash of lightning, and like or life goes quickly. It is like a flash of lightning. So a flash of lightning is produced, and then sort of automatically or spontaneously disappears, and that's like the life of living beings, and also it's like mountain cascade. The water goes very quickly down the side of a mountain. Well,
oh yeah, it is some babjushin the New this way.
well,
Risar with Seman Zoyade, Risar with Babchunashi Chig, Dagi Marco, Zogi Matuchi.
well, that means that it's a very steep incline, and then that means that the water never stays. It's just going the whole time.
Oh yeah, oh the Induco, Maranzu Luin and Ra, Soyin and Ra, Lonjuin and Ra, Nelly Lonjucarina. Go, you don't Kengi, I give you Kukeji, Jiggy order. Oh, the Midavare, Sierra. You don't Kengi, Kukeji, I give you there go order. Oh, this on the go. Oh, Zangaki was on that. So our bodies, places, and resources then are because they're dependent upon causes and conditions to constantly keep them in a state of production. Then they're constantly changing from one moment to the next. From one that they're momentary. Well, oh yeah. The go let on you move on to Kiawata, Luda, and Longula over Tezukanga. Keji in Juracha, Chile, Meta, Heat and Mirwa Sonza, and you go Dunyawa Resuardo. Dunyawa.
Right. And then because they're constantly being produced by our former karma and our afflictions, then it's also said that the phenomena of the world are, give rise to suffering.
Drusa. Oh yeah. Oh, Tundakar Sotako, Dunyawares, Samnina. And the Keva now Chivala Soba, Deva many Batadu Sobako, Durachan condemned his redo, no good doing our Sierra.
Because based on the karma and afflictions, then we undergo various sufferings like birth, aging, sickness, and death. Then and we're in a constant state of change. Then also in this respect, it's giving rise to suffering. Well,
oh yeah. Tishimidale Tunges. Oh, Dunga was on the leader of Chico, Gekanational Soba, Dungaki, she didn't Chigavata. She nearly Longela Soba did Samage. Echo. Bureaucracy ko yiden birwa sonza yi kyoa gebe shi bena misawa sigdo misawa se de ni yongdo lu do jine kasinga zu misawa she tsara misawa se so ni de bala so tin de res o dina shingo bu shenda kanga bureaucracy ko semle kyoa gebe shi re de do sem kyoa gebe shi sonza ya misawa as ko ne lu lonji sama o tene Lugi some Goakibi Shisonza, Miss Awas. And then some Goakibi Shish in Duyara, teach and Miss Awas.
So, in general, we're sort of, think of the places, bodies, and resources of the world as something very pleasurable and something to delight in. But from the aspect of because they give rise to suffering, then from that perspective, then they're called unclean, or here we could say impure, because they serve as a basis for our aversion or disgust, if you want a stronger term, in them, and it's a little bit different from the kind of the idea of them being impure that we were talking about. There's two meanings of being impure, so this is like a second meaning of being impure, or what do you say, unclean here. We had the one about the bodies yesterday being unclean. This is a slightly different meaning.
Oh yeah. And it could get Guracha. And it don't even run Shinchan. Some Kyoa gave a hill to you, called Rawajan to Guamare, Rawajan to Guamare, Led and Yumo be Shawajan and Koya take you are. And it don't even run into Guza. Oh, Metabada, Dungavada. The day in Bechan, Rawan Dameva is, Chutamja Dameva, Satelia. Chutamjel Jajuara, Namba Suta Rachel Soba, Rawandu to Betangi to Meba, Shalla Turch in Delne, Alichio de Shimado, Mangaragi said, Rawandu to Betangi Meba. Carese, Kuda King in Medaba Shamachere, Tunge Shamachere, Tell Rawachi on Yomarwa, Odiende, Rawandu Matu Betame is in the Chachura.
So then, these things that are of the world, we can say, well, all phenomena, but well, in this case, we're talking about the
Geshe Thabkhe,
all composed phenomena are impermanent, and it means that constantly changing in this way, and then these impermanent things of the world are produced by our afflictions and karma, and therefore we say that they're, give rise to suffering. And then based upon this, then because they have this nature of giving rise to suffering, then we think of them as objects of aversion, or they're impure. Then based on these three, then and in particular based on the, usually it's not counted the third one, but based on their being impermanent and giving rise to suffering, then we say that they're selfless, okay, in the sense that they don't, because they arise dependent on something else, they're always dependent on these factors of being impermanent and giving rise to suffering. Then, so then they have no independence, or there's no independence. The self has no independent existence. It's a dependent arising. So in that sense, then they are selfless. They don't have a self in the sense of being an independent self.
No, that oh, that got so this, ne? Medabada, Tunga Samlata, and a koala in Junke, and a koazawa, Tangzin Yamuzawa, Tangzi Sonza, Tangzi Boy Chedo, ne Dame Tongbanikum. Oh, Delitan and a Tarvatova Chekoyade.
So then, based upon their being impermanent and giving rise to suffering, then one develops a profound wish to leave cyclic existence. Renunciation is another way this is translated, or a determination to be free of the suffering of cyclic existence. Then, in order to attain this freedom, one engages in cultivating the view of things as lacking an inherent or independent self.
Lada Nyamu be Shamadu Kurne, Kwa Koale, Targu, Tarduva Teshindo, Ranchibu, and a Kwa Tanduna, Tarvanduvaina, Semte, Marumbaye. Rangi Pamaji Simjela Soba Shanda Dunga Tavalia, Samlamataji, Sosuchi Butari, Samlatana, Maroibe, and a Ranko Dunga Nawashindo. Rangi Pamaji Simja Namja, Danzinda, Chaudangi Shawan, Lesa, Tiongi Kwa Kote Tunga Dale, Tando Tarva Chegure, De Tandaran, Nuva Mana, Rangi, Dunkus Yunde Kunde, Sanji Kova Toba Chene, and the Simja Tamjek. Touchimba, Lapchimba, took two days, or teach you doing a Sanji Kova Tower Chagins, teach you doing it, Medava doing a Tome, Tamil Soba Tombe, she gave a shung the Yangi Sambe, Gunu set on the Sangore. Oh, yeah.
So then, just like myself, being under the influence of impermanence and my former karma and my afflictive emotions. So all living beings who have at one point been my closest relative, my mothers, all these living beings are also under that same influence of these factors of former karma and affliction. So it's not correct, it's not appropriate for me just to pursue my own liberation or freedom from suffering. I must attain the highest enlightenment so that I can help all living beings to attain the freedom from suffering. So then think that with this motivation I will listen to these teachings today from Aryadeva's 400 teachings on impermanence, suffering, impurity, anyway, and then uncleanliness, I don't know, and selflessness.
Boya, talk about this, show look at Gagrangani.
Juktama de Yangyasuna?
Well, I can love that because it's every much young against.
Well, so I was thinking that maybe the verse 60 was not so clear yesterday in my translation. So then I asked Geshe if he would read it again. So we just, before we get to 67, we'll do verse 60. Duktutamade.
Oh. Duktutamade did it, Wakase. Ore. Jeba da Pemelo Sobarwa. Oh, Tenet, Tobatembe Tawade, Teve Cho Yimbe, did don't near Jaresna. O dirigma res tishekwa o garesna machak bala damage sikwa o de karsure o tena dajum bala soba rawa o tene tindele chakwa menge tezuge misama kombala soba tinde chakwa mege tezule sigora machak bala damage se pemele chakwa kange yita machak bala damage se aderedo Machak bala se aderedo pemela machak bala tela mibe ne tewa meje chakba de kigma resigdo machak bala ane chakbe tewa de chori mare sigdo tele chakshin chigma rese de lumi la menace de chakba de ko lumbu o soso samlo va ne toda ne chenge rimado ngoy ne chul ko kari mai takshe mache fiche soso semge pa Nisangala Sangal Soba Tintin Lumbu Zuliane, Tishinji Chapa to Kigi or Reswara. Then Lumi Lamena Ase. Teaching Lamna Lutambo.
So if we look at the verse, then it's treating the topic of the unfeasibility of the the pleasure from intercourse with women or men as the best pleasure in the desire realm. So here, those without desire have no pleasure. This is talking about arhats. Arhats have given up all attachment. So then... So also it's not only arhats, but those who meditate on the body as being unclean, and so in that meditative state they have given up the attachment. Nor do those not foolish have it. Also, Drisa.
Oh yeah. Ta kangi tado tiro machapala temeje ten lumi la menachero. Kangi tado chirchoba te dewa chindeshis. Kangi tado chirchoba sude pemele chaba kangi ye tado nelugi tenle chirchoba sigora. Mo ne suchi misawala soba tunge rashi tesu samlo madangenge sosu chimiji namdoge pa Totawa in a sigora. Kangi tado chirchoba, Nelu, Nesudilia, Samamata, Tilet, Chirchone, Chumiji, Namdo can get to Lasugora. Let the show to Juba Chindawa, or Tinde, Kangi tado chirchoba, they were Chindashi, Tezulet, they were conditioning Yubate, and they were short Maresugora. Marite, Telechaba Menget to the letters to Kigman to us than the Contish. Oh yeah.
So then, how can the pleasure of one who, if we look at the commentary, to finish the verse, how can there be pleasure for one whose mind constantly strays? So how can the pleasure of one who desires a woman or desires a man and whose mind constantly strays from reality be the best? Reality here being the reality of what do you say, uncleanness, we can think, or the reality of and it is not best. Those without desire for women or for men do not have pleasure focusing on them. And yes, that is so.
No, yeah, that did they because she loved it to the shoulder to resist. Or they pedalia, she sent us your day, show the leption. Page it what they shoulder to resist. Oh, Penetramsemo. Kala sama to Medrinia, but the Kalamang would the chess having a mille mate, so long much if she take her says to her. That's why. Oh, the penny, but the letter young good one. Oh, no, you care about that yaga to Sulose. Jabba does with an similar so, but in the bay, Yanni get 2,000 yard to look so young good one. Oh, the day yard and get Chilia, look, Kilologic Gazetito. Oh, take care of the permit the summer and it's some summer of the Javachi to give us. Ecco, c'è tu me sempre che aboge. Alle cose da ascianti Yagumares, Corazo Randugi, Dojuna, Shanda Dawachuna Chechuna, Yabures Lamne, Nikiabu with the Nyaja, and Shandakanga Rawatepe Shadwa, Ye Pechichagua, Penny, or the love Shandi Tida Sonda.
So then,
Sholoka de Lapti.
Verse 61 has two analogies, and the second analogy then sort of helps to understand this. A certain king kept hundreds of women in his palace, but did not sleep with them, nor give them to anyone else. One day a monk asked him whether he slept with all the women, and he said he did not. The monk, in order to have them set free, spoke to the king about religious practice, and they were freed.
Oh yeah, that's this one.
No, this one.
I shall look at Cabales on Anita.
That Tuture Dun.
Oh yeah.
So this was the monk was intentionally doing it to help them to be free. So now we're on verse 67.
다니바 니가라 무슨 소바단 덴베 제보 세벤 직대 경화 최민베 베네스 오르도 로 분소단 덴베 제베 니가라 제보 세벤 직대 경화 최민바르다 제보 그러와 아니 직대 경화 쉬어도 어디든지 최민바디 셰도 로핀조단 덴베 제베 아니 세벤 직대 경화 세베 거네 고랑에 인삼 착신 제베 거네 아니 직대 경화데 아니 최마레스 가지스네 제보라 매버샤와 마레스 제보랴 메라타야 요 마레스 마레스 제보게 아니 벤 직대 두 경구요 와스게 와라 아니 텔이야 직대 제보게네 세베 거네 고랑에 착신 기거네 아니 직대 경화데 아니 가르소래 maybe ne mai so dig mareti maybe ne res shegdo dichilab
what did chiten gyalbo did druktur did getu
ra garje shol
druktur
Tuju
and druktur dun yeah
rabji Tuju de gaze rabji sumbarwa Tuju de
rabche nibe sumbare la de
tuba gande tuba sumbarwa da Tuju de de ya that Joshua tunga
we're both getting confused. The translators getting confused, the teachers getting confused.
Translators getting the teacher confused.
Yeah, like that.
Oh yeah. That's sumba for me le mizawar to shindo and chakwa mirik basigdo. Ra tar keba de peme kari na ya and le mizawa yin ya tele tewa jo chakwa rigres tinde samba yin o de rig mare sigdo keba peme kangi le na le mizawa da res ina ko tele tewa jo sonza ne tele chakwa rigdo asna o de rig mare sigdo ande.
Okay, so the topic here is expressed on page 109. We are for verse 67. Though women's or men's bodies are unclean, desire is reasonable because they are a source of pleasure. So when one realizes they are unclean, desire is inappropriate.
Oh yeah, this all got mizawala timuni. Jungshi Chowan Jung Riki is number Kundu de Shadin Jungarikba Mahino Sigdua Garsigwersona Mizawa imba Hakugana, Mizawa imba Toshindo, Telechakba Rigma Resigura. Oh, Karesana Mizawa Kangbe Ziba Las, Pena Mizawa Rijitua Yuvachitowash. This was a Kangbe Tisuna. Oh, Tetonwe Timu Jungs Tingawe. Nebe Chowan Jungsi, oh, that's over Chesusan, and a Kangba Kanga Choba Gosuche, and Mungba Jungsi, Timak Sabu Yosane, go conjure of Jungsi Grimado, oh, that is Yabudes, Chakwa Rigmar Vasigora, oh, Dinashi, number Kundu Chesu, Metumbe and the Shanin Jua, Rigwa Mainos, Kiba the Peme Kangiluna, Lumizawa Rese. Mizawa Kangbetsi, the Kangan Jungsak Jungu de Res, some Hakugi Kugilia, and the Yagure, some somebody, Rigma Residua, Petina Sheres.
So the verse says it is reasonable for confusion and anger about the unclean to occur. It is not at all reasonable for desire to occur. So in the commentary it says when one steps in excrement without noticing it, it is feasible that confusion could occur, and then that you could how did this get here, and you think like that, and then you could get really angry. So then But it's completely unreasonable to think that somehow you'd think, oh, this is a good situation, and then for desire to somehow occur. So
this one. Oh yeah, pena chemo mezawa nembashin ta pedera. Sanago to bashi do meji talk batasha this was nemsuna atati masun samgirwa petires.
So anyway, the example is like stepping in excrement at the night. It's just somebody left their poop on the on the way, and you stepped in it, you would be really upset and angry about it.
Oh, that you want to call solution. Lu mizawa to read jigdeni ya tini kyonjen zig mares mizawa reje kyon di samlutang mares wara ko yonde samlutang mado. Oh, this one ko kyonjen yimbe ne meja means jigdeli ya tini kyonjen ke mares di kyonjen meza lu de liya ke ba peme kang lu na meba che mebe ne ke mares sambayina o de de mares yegdo.
So the next verse is then dealing with the assertion, though the body is unclean, it is not considered to be objectionable because conventionally it is without shortcomings. Just in the world, people say that the body is, nobody says that the body is unclean. But that also is incorrect.
Oh, teko daga bene Hindu ngeme 장선 두수 흉날이요 임버라. 어 대때면 셴레 잠sen 남장 des. 링에나네 베네 릭시소레 어 디나네 릭마도 저 류다 다다 메상와레데 릭토하게 잠세다 개부도 저게네 장마레스기와라. 제가 셴레 잠sen 남장슈데레 샤라. 디나네 잠세 베메도 저 군레야 장슈레스 셰도가 스티송자코 So
then there's a convention in Indian society at the time. The two higher castes, the Brahmin and the royal caste, were people from that caste were considered to be pure, and the lower castes were then considered to be impure. So it says here, it is said, Brahmins are purer than others, and women purest of all. Rasa.
This way. Oh yeah, that the shul got young to. Oh, you can do this. Mina mato, Mizave, Nune, Mebar, Jungur says to Mina mato said, oh, did you give my discouragement? Semneldo menebe minamato sura. Sembe ngobe pige lugi rangshi chimachi shenge. Ane sem kadul pa tenge yena. Ti mituzu tende samgu maris wara. Sumi yiji ke namdo ke kor totaje semneldo rangshi del madeveche saba suzu semgi soyone totange tilas wara. Semneldo menebe minamato se tama yige dindwa. Minamato mezave None mebar jungur nasingedwa. Odi minamato se semneldo minebe sumi jige namdoge toda denge di maige madoba ngengyu so mizawe none shindo mebar jungwar gyunase. O tene kyokbala soba mizawe kyakjinla soba otezo ene mizawe yemba shindo mebar gyurba de lula tene jungyu waresi wara. Tende lu gale tezu sokba tsige yuna lu gale mizawa gyundun jungwar gyurwa tene mebar semneldo neba sushi gyuzenchi mesemde pemegi lu meja mayi shejawa mirik sos. Odire ala mizan jungyurwa tene mebar chi mesemse. Mizawa kasure mebe ne yemba mizawa tsige yuna ti kala jungsak jungun tewan dabde ane mizawa mesewa de karjenze ti namdo chumiji namdo yenge mado shendaga tende samgi mare sigdwa.
So the verse says, if except to some people a pot of filth is objectionable, so it when it says except to some people, it's talking, you can see in the commentary there on the next page, when all except people not in their right mind find a pot full of filth, such as vomit, objectionable. So the commentary adds in this idea of not in their right mind. So the exception would be people, such kinds of people who are then sort of have some kind of a where they exaggerate. The mind is dodok means like you're superimposing something that doesn't exist on something that does exist. It's a kind of exaggeration. So sometimes we just translate it as a mistaken superimposition. So then, except for such kinds of people, then everybody would find a pot full of filth objectionable. So then the verse then ends with, why would one not think objectionable that from which the filth comes? So then why would anyone sensible not consider the body from which such filth constantly comes objectionable? Well,
Zema Chakbe Yurichipe Kawaki Sersin Bechera. Oh, the Tambo Tunduzako, Karni Shinjakigra. Tade Nani, and a Karsure, Kubeku, to share, and make you jet in the road of Tonsona, and the Uncle Shinja Mabu to us. Chesa Soso Venepa, Soso Semge, Badachi Remato. Oh, Tadamo, the Yoga Resgorda.
So the example is of lustful men who saw attractive qualities in a beautiful woman but found fault with her when they saw her carrying a pot full of vomit. It's just that they when they were lustful, their attachment became very strong. But once they saw something disgusting like the vomit, then their attachment immediately disappeared. So then. The idea is that they're just making it up in their, with their thought, in their minds.
Oh yeah. Tangaba dire, sholuka ngaba di tunja ngaba dire to tama sheke. Oh peme keba de peme lula sokbalya. Tsawa yores karisne. Ya mizo ne tsawa shingido kebe peme lu tsawa shin peme kebe lu tsawa shingido shenas gora. Oh de yina ya peme lu keba peme lu ya tsawa shimba de madibere. So then
we're on the 69th verse here, which is number 5 of all these. If you look on page 310, you'll notice that it's sort of the 5th of the different refutations that refute desire while seeing the body as unclean. So here we're refuting the idea that women's bodies or men's bodies are clean. So then women's or men's bodies are clean because people regard them as clean. That's the assertion. Okay.
This one.
Yeah.
Mobu Tsawa Tamjeki, Tama Kangdo Migyurba, Tola Tsawa Yodoshi, Londe Mini Sushi Masigdwa. Chaza Keba the Peme Karina, Pena, Tagay Netishita Tim Shidadwa, Medor of Sanjel Pue, the Chitaba Shiba Puina, and Labatu Show Medua Manu, but the Betumandum, Tindichen, Digmedua, and the Kobeju Chessers, Misawa Stigdwa. Ordination, Mobu Tsawa Tamjeki, Tama Kangdo Migyurba, Tola Tsawa Yodoshi, Londe Mini Sushi Mase. Peme de Kebala Sobage, and Tsama Yuse, Londe Mini Sushi Madi Rigmaride, Medoda, Trimada, Kangela Sobachi Tezo, Tsangmatilia, and the Keba de Pemege, Rexar, Num Sarsona, the Mizawa Res Shagidu Aswara, but Tsama Yanani, the Shaku Marvasigua.
So this comes from maybe I'll read the verse first. The clean things are looked upon as the most worthless of all. What intelligent person would say that it is clean? So here, the idea is there's a kind of custom in India when you're making offerings, like offering flowers, for instance. You can't put it up to your nose and then sniff it and then offer it, or hold it in your hand and then offer it. It's a kind of convention there. So then it says clean things like flowers, perfume, ornaments, and so forth are looked upon as the most worthless of all by virtue of having been in contact with a woman's or man's body, just as the so then it doesn't mean whether they touched it or smelled it. It's the same. So just as the sweet water of the Ganges becomes saline on meeting the ocean. So then it's just like thinking of the Ganges as being as very sweet, pure water meeting the ocean and then becoming saline. So just whether those objects being offered are in touch with a woman's body, a man's body, then they're considered unclean at that point.
Mares Geshe Kakwa Sumdo, the Tambo the Garsa, Tambone, Luigi, and Ekare, Chekba, Tove, Lu Tower, Shemba Kakwanis. Okay, the Luliane, but the social Lulia, Yabu and the Tangma by the Tinderson, and Najek to us, Chekba to us. Oh, this was a called Lulia, Tangma Yoba Resin, oh, the Lula Chekba Javatove, Lu Tangma Yoba. Here
we're starting another section. Well, it's the sixth of these refutations, but it has three parts to it. So this particular refutation is refuting other seeming reasons for considering the body clean. The first one being this verse 70, refuting the idea of the body as clean because others are seen to be proud of it. So the assertion is the body is clean because one sees people taking pride in it. Like when they think about their body, then they think they have great pride.
So Ludi Tambu Chadu Keshagora. And then my Kogbenal Tedusa, Shangan and Drave, Timasoba Yuge, Tina Loliatene, Sosuya Kigiorno, Shangan Nandu Chese. And Teme Bane, Shangan, Timasoba Yuge, and it Chula Soba Tindege, Tinge Yuge, Tisinglia, Sosuludia Chayungora, give the Kanshi Shangan Nandu Ches. Teme Bane, Minepa Sigura. Shangangi Ningusa was that to my Soba Chudusura, never Cheba Timena, Tinde Soba de Marina, you saw somebody I get to your Marisora, Temebane Minebase, Temebane Minebase. In Mizawa de Ludi Simbunashi race and Buddin the Soban and Yakevanashi, Marazo Ludi Yake and Goresora. Tela Mongbasi, Narazu Yake said, the social Samloviti, could give Jungu, that Kesa that in the Sam Madam Jamongbe, Sango Nyamdo, Tabakeva Sabarmado, Telane, Desambe, Sangmare Sambe Tabakevade, Rigimare Sigua. Kanshi Shangan Nanduce, Temepan and Minebar. In Mizai, why Saint Dela, Mongbe Tabakeva says. Mizavenali King Busina, she society in the Surichi, Kebapeme, Sune Lulia, Teliane, I lose some money, some Tabakeva, Rigmares Suda.
So, here the verse states, whoever has lived in a privy and without it would not have survived. This is talking about being in the mother's womb. So whoever has lived in a privy and without it would not have survived. In such a dungworm, arrogance arises only through stupidity. So whatever is born from the womb has lived in the mother's womb between the stomach and intestines, which is like living inside a privy. There's a lot of unclean things within that womb, and so in that sense, it's like living in a privy. Like a dungworm, it has been nurtured by excremental juices, without which it would not have survived. So the fetus really has to survive on things that are unclean. Pride, thinking of that as clean, arises only through stupidity, or simply ignorance. And here, you can, as an alternate translation. It is absurd to be proud of just that. So, well,
Pemeden Javache Joy Serva. Alco made Hako Kotu Simje, Alco Shangas, Sanju, that's over Sasat in the Yorba Chilo Yamaina, Chilo Sasha, Tinalco Chushai, Tikilia. Tenago dinner, there's a young Shidakala Madashan, and you imagine Chava Mabutanje, the Zogwagi, Lusagi, Superstition got the shield drawing better. The shield did the Teco Tarre. Kotane, Koran Namuja Hakon, and Nicolia, so what you Amjite, and the Becala to the Yabus Dash, Nimakashi Shan, and Koyashine, server Yabuchade. A chan and Konimachico, so what to Tolo Sabaraj children drawing better. Children do they make your bushig to low call to low those two in better. The Jagalia Tishina or Rigmalu, Chichil, two Chokmarati matter. Make your bush in Dronico. Tas Gandhi told my the controversial toss to him, but the controversial I care, putting I lose some material Mizawa to load that you lose to jetting all the two successes. Queen of the Shagiora. The Koran said Mizawa and Alzuja Yombere, and I under the thoughts of Samara Sonia, my year my temperature, Shangy to the Mizawa Sigdosima.
So the example is of a young man who he was. I guess he was caught with another man caught him with his wife, and so then as punishment he threw him in his cesspit. I guess it was like a cesspool. Just he couldn't get out. It was a deep pit, and so he survived by eating excrement and being very filthy for a long time. But one day there was a strong rain, and it sort of destroyed the whole structure of this cesspit, and this man was able to escape. And then some people found him and helped him out and cleaned him up, and then so he put on some very nice clean clothes and everything. I guess he was probably from a higher caste, and so when he was out walking, somebody from a lower caste happened to brush against his clothes, and he turned around to them and said, your vile clothing has made me unclean. But but it's just like he never had any kind of pride when he was in the cesspit, right? So the minute he had some kind of change in his situation, then his pride sort of came, sort of rose up.
That's right.
Well, that's true.
That did it down. Get the trailer so bad. Lily, I gave up a Macari Luinaco, trailer so bagane, Lu Sangmasway or Wasuara. That is something about the Lulia, Sangmasway or is a tree captain, Chu Sang Shed wasn't it? Lu Mizawa, Nekasure, Lu Mizawa, Chan Bebe, Poma, Tongue. Oh, that Lugi Mizawa to the tree, Sangmasway, the Tendeshe or the Tesam de Lu Sangman Jurkim Harese. Oh, Tishegua, Dimashete.
So in number 71 here, then the assertion is the body is definitely clean, since washing and so forth removes dirt from it. So then this idea is refuted that somehow you can make the body clean by washing it.
Oh, that is my shadow. Oh, Tabaki, Lugan, Nambu Tower, me good so. Tapshi can take having a chilo chitri, Chabinaya, Mizawa Jungsok, so of the co, Nalo Leoguare. Oh, there's a co Tangmake so to be your marvas. Nambu Tower, me good nase. Chun and Nala Becheba, the Dar Chiru Lama is a Kutaneke Shenjaki, Lugi Chiru, some Shenjaki, Kiva Marvas, Lukoran, you tell Lugi. Chit Kashi Tangma Sevade, Lu Tangmak and Gurtu Mares, or Tangwe Chiru to Bever Chebe, Lule Chiruki Mezawa, La Mezawa Mai, Tela Tangwe Bever Riso, or that do ya.
So here, the verse reads, no means whatsoever will purify the inside of the body. The efforts you make toward the outside do not match those toward the inside. So here the idea is that no matter how much you clean the outside of your body, that all the impurities are on the inside of the body then coming out. So then you're not really dealing with all the impurities on the inside. So no matter how much effort you make on the outside, then how could you possibly think you're cleaning the body? So then because the inside doesn't get affected, so then how can you be proud about having a clean body?
Do so.
Yeah.
Oh, that is Pedro. Pede, that is Jagalia, Sing Champion Gudwa. Take a meadow, the marble of Chavish Massa. Lumber Chavish Masagua, Shanta Position with a part. Metoshi.
Meadow,
Sing Chambushi, Delia Metos and Delia Tisudo, Cesani, Nicasudo, Cesani, Palashasudo, Sing Palashasudo, Palasha Medosia, Medo Marble Shagua, the Massa, and the Columber of Chavish Masagua. Or Tindico, Shasangi, Janguyara, Jangu de Chidi. Oh, Dimasar did shut him and do the shut him and do that. Did some member some garage or chicken? Changuchi, oh, did a shamar, you gave over the kanga, shut it to some dish, married and all you gave over the shut here someday. Or dinner she did some married, now the teachers do Amani Rosa. Oh, dinner she see what I did.
So the example is of because of
Jani Janguni,
Damu, or not,
Shanta Briston, and what you do, Shari or Marwa. What you did, you can go member that she did son. Mansar de Shamarimo, you gave over the shy, Chilo, you over the talk about him, but now somebody said, now, what is
so there are two jackals sitting under a palasha tree, and the palasha blossom fell, and so the palasha tree has this beautiful red flower, but when it falls on the ground, it seems that it's like kind of like I guess it gets very moist. I guess when it degenerates or wilts, it gets very wet. So then the two jackals are sitting under, and then one of them is thinking, "Well, that looks like meat, really, on the ground there." They're sort of sniffing at it, and the other one, and then he looks up and he says, "Well, but it's not meat, and those probably aren't meat." But then the other one is thinking, "Well, that looks like meat, but it's not meat. But those up there, they look like meat." So the idea is that some people can see, think that cleaning on the outside is cleaning on the outside is making the body clean, when they're not thinking correctly about how on the inside there's still a lot of unclean things.
Oh yeah, that did. Sumba Transon Kadu changes de Suda. Oh, Pemegi Luliane, Transon Kadu chanting, choosing a Java Transon to Yora. Oh, Tezuga, ne permitting to us. Yeah, I never make a do chant to get any ever think to us at Chachura. What is on the Lulia, the Seba de Panzake Marese. Chakba the door came a race. Tenety, but what you shake do. Seba Panjaminos and all the matters, Seba Panko race to shake your.
So, since the next assertion then for verse 72 is that since ascetic sages do not give up women's or men's bodies, and craving for women or men is not something to abandon. And so that here then the verse is going to explain that craving is something that has to be given up. Well,
oh yeah, that get the the darse. Zenange does a child that chooses Zan to Matokwa Liliardo. Oh, they do get the Zension at the Dari Chinjan Kulasumbays. Oh, make a carina, Lu, Chimbada, Mizawala Sobaya, can't ever did Sumba Resgora. Oh, then the Zentos called the Zen Chigachilian and Jackie Yorba. Oh, then I say, the Zema engage again, the Zen to Tosla or the Zogba Samgiore. Koranzo Koran de Samgioma, the Indico, Tanson in the Kayanako. Sosu da shanda luniga mizan yimba tsungba sonza tiko tembarma do chidi tsangma yimbe chane ane ti temba ke mare sigdwa o pemi jinjen ya transong chigi mebonwe rangda rangshin jawe yinde sigdwa chigba sonza zejen penagashi koranzo jabu sonza chigi chili shenja ki yordo o gashi kona ta zejen mayinge chigi tewe na awako timada cha chusin zan tundi Yagumare some giver. Oh, today, the Kasure. Making a point, you Ranshin Tsungbe Yingi, Tsawam, I know, say. Go Ranshin Tsungba Sonza Koto was over Kida Pagwa in the court of in the case of Sogi or Marwa. Oh, the Tirima, the Kotsama, Yubeshane, then became a residua.
So, the verse reads, if, like leprosy, being full of urine were not common to all, those full of urine, just like lepers, would be shunned by everyone. So the idea is here that women's bodies, men's bodies, they're full of urine because and that everybody is similar in having these unclean things, whether it's and so it's common to everyone, and it's but lepers have a kind of unique body that everybody can't, when they see, they turn away and they hold their noses and so forth. It's just because of the uniqueness of their bodies, and whereas nobody's turning away from, because everybody's full of the same impurities, then nobody is turning away from them because all are alike. And but it's not because they are somehow clean. It doesn't make them clean that they are that way.
That's right. Pede pena power hakura. Kelia did chosunda. Odil power sigara. Lumba chilia ko mi mangsha tende yungudo chuda chat in the cabamendo. Lumba kajale mi power jama in the yungudo. Odina shiche lumba chilia mi power jen shichi in bacha. Chuda tende. Teneko power mevas lumba de chimbare. The cause of power send the coiturva. Tina Koranzo Kangali, you said the Yandel, why may get Michel Hoko, Yala Sami do such a Koba Maviness. What didn't she Koranzo Kanga change Mizawa Shiji Soza? And it again, the Zen to get to Guamara, dear Yamato, Kodi, Sama Imbish and the Maris.
So the example is of a man without a goiter. I guess there's this country where everybody, there's a certain region, and we can say it, where everybody had a goiter. some kind of flesh caused by what they eat or what they don't eat, or the water or something under their chin. And so when this man without a goiter came into the region there, everybody thought he was like totally strange, They were repelled by him because he was like missing this extra limbs kind of, and so then they thought he was ugly and so forth. So it's the same idea that although. And so they just sort of accepted. They had accepted this, this lump under everybody's chin as something beautiful, something ordinary, something like that. And in the same way, then we're just accepting that people have these unclean things within their bodies, like urine and so forth. But we're not. If it was an exception, then we wouldn't be that way. It's not that they're somehow clean.
Oh yeah. Tenishino kebe penen dreba adati lamne dura. Dan dusidwa. Kebe penen dreba taro sedwa. Tele penye sheyo serwa. Ada kebe pe shegdwa dikudire kasara. Lungba chi kebe che ne bang mesi mangbu yoimbra. Ada kebe delia lag lungdane. Oh sanyi dusi dinde chile chaba chipagure. Ti chaba dinala dugi ti yore ti chudi babsagi chudi tuna me nyamba chagrese. Ani ti sabsa chagres laibere. Tene ko jabu korang ti tungsagi chudu zangma cheche kapche chaba mabo chebere. Chema chaba tare mema chu ti sogi marai bere. Ani chudi tundi me ganga nyamba chalure. Nyamba chadu. Jabu nyamba machare. Jabu nyamba machade ne mitu gangal jabul teche konzu nashi konzu nyamba chade yoro. Konzu nashi ko chola machide. Da jabu nyamba chasha sigore. Tene jabu utore me shenda ganga ko nyamba chade yoro. Da ko nyamba medu shenda tadu ko cholam chiba madonje nyamba tongo yoro. Tene ko di chudi nyamba chaya chudi tone nyamba chego ya chore. Ko tinashi rese ko. Gyönje de maa yudu ko ti yabu yin samde ko tina lo ko gyönje memre gyönje na do sha yora. Techik dere.
So there's the example of a king of a certain region where the soothsayer predicted that when it rained, then the water would be contaminated, so that everyone who drank it would go mad. So then the king covered his well, and so when it rained, then everybody in that place went mad. I mean, the king was the only person who was sane. So then everybody thought he was mad because he was so different from them. And when the king found out, he feared that they might mock him or harm him, and because they considered him mad. So then he used the water too. So that's the idea. It's it just what isn't particularly correct, then it becomes the normal, right?
Dende yongdo lungbe na ko chidan yawo mene chizo korana dende chi yawo imba tarde yone yawo mare se to marwa e korana dende chi kongesu de chalu yora dende mangwe yori chizo.
Yeah, there's plenty of examples we can think of where we go in and visit certain people, and they have some kind of a custom that doesn't seem correct to you, but then you sort of have to accept it to be part of that group of people, so forth like that.
Oh yeah, this one. Oh, that is good.
But it's not that it's correct, right? It's
this one. Yeah. Tagade kebada peme karine ko lu tene changmasu timashimbu chu do chu tende yabu soya yorwa sigora. No this one ko ne mezawar shembade ke mezawa ke mare samgu mare samna sigordo. Tila so be kembe ne changwar shin changmasin jina digre mezawar samgu mare samna sigora. Oh dig mare sma shegdo.
So the next one is refuting the idea of cleanness because of wearing perfumes and so forth. Verse 73. Although a woman's body or a man's body is unclean, the uncleanness can be removed by beautifying it with perfumes, colognes and so forth.
This one. Oh, Deleta, Yala Nyamba Gashini Sudwa, Naya Same Kajurtar Sudwa, Mizan Church Medola, Sogba, Deja Tishinu Sudwa. Then Yala Nyamba, Mikashe. No good that I'm sure that the Mangacha Guardo. Or the no good subsearch and double search, DJ Giorva. I'm just depending on the soya, so subsearch, soya. Or dinner, Yala Nyamba Gashine, now it's some Kajurdas. No good, no good subsearch. I'm just some double search, Coca, we are ordering. I'm sure you get it. Oh, yeah. Message Medola, Sogba. Deja Tishino, Oda Mizawa diet and the Medoda, Timashimbo, Dodo, Chu, Shevasuki, Bagua, and Shevajuara, or Chevaja Tisigardo, Chirju, Tava, Medola, Soba, Lulan Doshi, Tekone, Mizawa, Juru Nyamdo, Semba, Tin Deve, Luzan, Mu, Ticheve, could lose someone Yuguma Richard, that and the Shilolia, Zamadan, Doda, Bagwakar, Shevajavina, and Tezamjiko. Someone to my race or take on no good magnetic, no good subject on it, and that could the Yahweh is some gender. To Meduja, you tell it to my Abusu yourself, Chanto, the kayak and my race.
So then the verse says, just as someone lacking a part is delighted with a substitute nose, desire holds that impurity is remedied by flowers and so forth. So here the idea is that, again I was saying, I guess you could say a nose or false teeth and so forth. He's thinking of his false teeth. Then you have some kind of, you feel kind of proud. Oh, now I've got a nose, and some people have like their ears replaced, and or some kind of I don't know, something there that looks like an ear, right? And so they get very proud. Now I look fine because I've got this, artificial ear. That it's the same thing. It's never you're never really going to be able to cover up the impurities of the body with whatever you put, flowers or whatever you perfume and cologne and so forth. This is not going to somehow. It's just sort of masking something that's already unclean.
This one. Oh, yeah, Tatelia, Penas Peteredwa, Chilena la Mar Cube, Casa Joe, Changbuya, Nicara, Nubada, Dumber Sambashin Sura. Chizi in the Yorba, Chizi Akora.
Oh,
Chizi Nagulia, Commander Chuvina, Aniko, Martimaka, Kavaduna, Ma Mengenge. Was Pali Cambodia, Oti Marisha Sangi, Oti Nashiko, Chilo Jitamasu, Tanga, Zamasha, or some Giores, or Dinesh.
So, Gigi, the Shimi,
that degree, Shimi said, well, Chilas or Shimi degree.
Okay, so then.
That did it.
I was just asking whether it was a mouse or a cat, but I think it doesn't matter really. So then you can. The idea is it's like smearing butter on a cat's nose, which makes it think even a handful of insipid food is rich and tasty. So it just goes smelling. Everything smells like butter. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Shiba Kala Dirva. Shiba Kala, that is Shiba Tama Panja. Shiba Chalde Kiribe Yutedala, Sawar Shiba Kagbanese. Okay, then Yabara Charibe, Tilla Soba Yudushana, that is the Nebardo Shenja Chavibe Tida Su La Soba, Tala Soba Tinde Yord, this one, and Kala Chalde Kiribe Yuteda. Tsangwar Shimba, Chagba the Tego Mariko, Yugashe, Shenja Chiribe, Tilla Soba, Rolla Soba, Yoda Tilla, and it's Tsangwar Shimba, Riso, Senasigdwa. No, I think Rigmaris or the Shagdwa.
Right. So here we have the assertion or the thought that there are fragrances and so forth for which one invariably does feel desire. So there's something that for which we can really feel desire. Well,
this one.
No, this one.
Oh yeah, that is Kangdo Desha Telke Varva. Tezan Sheshar Mireke Sigdwa. Desha Gurgube Mobo, Kangna Yuva Maris, Taco, Tachi Dutene, Yabu Yangi, Suda Tirujala Soboyode, the Zuli Chaba Riso Siora. Never Desha Gurgiva, never to Chagube, Dewey Chingang Mobuchi, Kangna Yuva Maris Sigdwa. Never Desha Gurgube, de Kangna Yuva Maise, Shologo Omatic Sigdwa. Sakanibutic Sigdwa. Yuva Maimbertasura. The Kangdo Desha Telkewa, the Zansha Mirila say. Tarkul and Desha that ever Jewish Karesne, Kaduina go Chakba, Mobuchi Marese, Tango Chakba Chima Chakwa Mange, Yankansan Gashil Chakba Gashila Magic, Kaduina. Chagwa Mobu Yomar, Suda Yomaris, what Tama Tambu Chagwa Cheso, Chagwa the Travan Jurgris, what oh, Tisunda, Kangdon Desha, Tejawa, Tezan Shesha, Mirilase, Never Desha, Jurgube, the Kangna Yomaese. Tartani Lu Kangdo, Pagba Tajumba, Namlan Desha, the Tower, Gavase, Pagba Tajumba Namla, Tar said in Oh, Kangdon Desha Tejawa, the Zansha Mirite, never Desha Jurgube, where the Kangna Yomais. This one.
Right, this one. So, it is inappropriate to call clean that towards which freedom from desire arises, nor is there anything which is a definitive cause of desire. So the idea here is that there's nothing that's going to always be a cause of desire. There's some people lust after it, and other people don't lust after it, for instance. And in particular, it's said here in the verse that in the end, we're talking about objects of the senses. So then these objects of the senses, when we attain freedom from attachment, will be the basis towards upon which we do attain freedom from attachment. So to call clean the body and so forth, towards which the exalted foe destroyers, the arhats, have generated freedom from desire, is inappropriate.
This one. Oh, that don't occur to us. Mobu Korang and Nevardu Chabaki never to get to getting over Ko Marisora. So then Samlutandake, Chimiji, Namdo Yavada, Mebe, Kavandu Mado, Congo Chabaki say using a 2000 Chabaki give all day Yomara. Can get the magic in you. So then Samlutanda she cared to be with Alco with Never do Chaba to getting over Yomara.
So it's really. There isn't anything that can be only a production. It can only produce, attachment or lust or desire in all cases. So there's plenty of examples of people who wouldn't be thinking of it. What this indicates is that we're sort of creating it through our own, misconception. We're just maybe it's a technical term, and it means that you're just superimposing something that's not really there upon it, and this is what are we taught? I'm trying to think of the word that we use. Well, it's easy just to think of it as misconception, something like that, or incorrect attention, I think, is the one we do. You just something like that. So that's what's going on. Is just the person who sees it with such desire is seeing it, incorrectly.
Lisa, oda pedere da pede kawandosa. Ore pede diresha kasore. Chongbaji ko chongjam kaskan juyora. Eko lungbachi shin tele akora pemechi de te ti pomuchi chongi baro. Eko lo mambo shanda chenje lo mambo chensa de ne ya yete chu lo yombe chi yombe baro. De chilo le ako pomuden de mambo she japchi pe tongi bare. Koran bombo yibate ko pe ya wo shoji do some chabaje re kolya. O kene me de ti surese o ti gerang bombo de dasla. Chilab de ko ne ho te samje chabama jure. Chesa ko koran chane tachi du ti gigyo mara. So samlo ta jokte.
So there's an example of how this would work. A merchant on a long journey was on a long journey when his daughter was born, and so he had to sort of remember how his daughter. He didn't really know how his daughter was. So on the day he returned, his daughter, who had grown up, was playing with other girls in the park on the outskirts of town. On seeing her, he felt strong desire. I guess he'd been away for a long time, and when he heard from someone else that she was his daughter, his desire left him. It's just like, so an object here. The idea is that that the object isn't just sort of something that's in all cases going to always cause one to be lustful, and because his once he found out, oh, that's my daughter, his attachment, his lust just went completely.
That's right. Oh yeah, ngaba tanya la de chinji malok be yishi ngobu chigla sibar temba sigdwa.
Oh gena. The dutse dat danda tung so ha. That's a dutse zogdorgede.
Rebe.
No, ne kama.
Ani deshaga.
No, deshaga.
Sholuga chigle. Oh yeah.
Oh. So if anybody had any questions, maybe this is a good time to ask some questions. We'll just leave it with the that last verse. I got a few questions here.
Yeah.
2 questions. Neither.
Yeah.
I guess that's did Shoktan to you.
Yeah.
Oh, did. Kasang the gana the tune down the
Rabji kare sholuga kare.
Oh, the Rabje Nibagi Tala the Kasa Jebechi Yor Kasa the Kasa Ignian Dawa Drakpa ki Kebachi Yor the Chikti do re chikti do mare sigiore dene di do re mare di kayena di gecham de the do karade de ko do karade ko do ge tendi yaba gogi me
de do situ sanje chum de song shabe song do sula do sigiora oh di sanje ge chinju do ge cham shabe shungdusula tenju sigara. So ngomba ti dungi nane di karsore. Di sanje ka re singe sanje ka ma re singe ni. Chita ma to sene sanje ka re sera. 도대바데 샨다스 산제가 마레세리오라
도데바다.
어디인데 영리티 산제가 멤베 장 송고요라 템베 송솔로 임베다 지측시오라 어디데네 로벨루다 바다바다 디카스레 아야데와 테소게 디나리아 산제가 임바요레 멤바요레스 산제가 딘데 수투니 다좀바도 루루세 샤브라 잔디 산제가 임바 다 멤버 찬이 요바 시기도 시거라 돈도 세들 수터스라 산제 송에 섭지 자치 망부 송에 요레 도좀 송베 찬는 도슬라샤라 단주스도 산제지 공부한데 시기 남바 산제베 케베 삼바들라 단주스거라
도좀 Pune Dodi Ming.
Do said the Ming Tagu at the Dirva. Dosam send Dortus in the Sanjay Chidan Sung Mangu Unako, Dosam Susung Shah Chane. Shedder, that is Shen Mashaka. Those are the Sanjay from the Sung Shabi Sung Delsigara. Or Dangerous teaching Juki, Kepa Sung Shab the Sigara.
So here on page 96, the second paragraph, there's an argument about something being a sutra or not. Why is this important? What is the definition of sutra? Does Aryadeva hold different views on this? So then it's what Buddha taught was put into it's described as being it's the name for that and how it was written down is called a sutra, right? And so then his followers then made commentaries on these sutras, and those are called commentaries, we could call them, or just treatises. So then there's somewhat of a debate about certain 7 treatises on knowledge, and some people say, well, it's sutra, and some people argue that it's not sutra, and so then Aryadeva and his Nagarjuna and his followers like Aryadeva, Shantideva, and so forth, they and Chandrakirti, they say that indeed this is there are parts of these 7 treatises that are sutra, are the Buddha's word. That means that they're what Buddha said, and so then they say what happened was the arhats, the followers of the Buddha, after the Buddha passed away, then they sort of condensed everything together into these 7 treatises on knowledge. So that's why parts of it are and parts of it aren't. Sometime the 4 aspects of the first noble truth are listed as impermanence, suffering, emptiness, and selfless. The first 4 chapters of the text seem to be in the same line. 1, is this correct? 2, why is the third aspect different? Dungalgi demba shigi nang ne dungalgi demba de la kecho shi yore dene de rapche shi de peche jipa yongi de midak dungal kasa midak dungal wa dang dongwa then de dang me ba dongwa de that's Mindrawa re yinian the Mindrawa gimseng kare de that's dongwa se yora yinian mitsangwa kasa zangwa dongwa mitsangwa se yoma de because rapche sumba de mitsangwa wa yinian kecho sumba de dongwa de then
because Chilai ba. Oh, Casare. Meda Dunga Ton Dame Shireva. Meda Dunga Ton Dame Shishegua. Dunga Dembe Keshu Shedusa. Medava de Medava Dunga Washerva. Tonda Dame Nibude, 다음에 교생님이 시기어레스 풍부가리아 라마베 다요 말레스 라마베 다음에 풍부가다 시기 풍부가보데 라마베 당니도요 말레스 다음에 봐세 풍부가보데 에네 풍불에 제 다대도 동생이 동바레스들 동바시기어라 저 다음에데 풍부가다 라마베 지도 마도 타대도 마도 베셔서 따고요라 디삼로 당기요라 세네 풍부레레레네 다마레 풍부레 로서 라마베 다요 마도 삼 당고도 켈레데네 풍부레야 라마베 다미도 삼제 공고요라 유제니데 다음에 봐다 동바스 풍부둥아보데다 다 풍부가보데 다기 당니도요 마레스 다음에 봐세 동바스 풍부가보데 다데 풍부가보레 베트 셴도 예베 동바레스 타데도 메바스요라
we had this
데 가르스 풍부데 미자와 주사르와 풍부 소부데 미자와 주사르와 제송니 되버 소바 어디인데 미자 풍부 미자와레 소부데 미자와레 미자와레 셴베 에네 장외 다 denshendo 풍부가레 denshendo 요 마레스고라 미자와 풍부가체 텔레 denshebe 네 다데 요 마레스고라 동아스 티스고라 이제 미제 동바 말람네 디고레 미다바 동에와 다메바 세션에 랑게트 비세기 다메발 코레 동아 다메 니스 디 주세니 부디 시고라 그래서 티케스 라인 바세브 마중레
conse chichena hagomas
데데라데
so maybe I didn't clearly explain it before, but this is the same question as we had earlier, and basically the reason that the third aspect is different is it's the last when you give the features of the first noble truth as impermanence and giving rise to suffering, emptiness, and selflessness. The two, the emptiness and the selflessness, are what do you say? Reasons for selflessness, really. And there's no real reason to make them two. You could just make them one, because they're two reasons for selflessness. And the first one, the fourth one, where it says selflessness, that's refuting a self-sufficient self, some kind of self that exists self-sufficiently. Not some kind of self, but just the self, thinking of the self in a sense of it being self-sufficient, then that kind of a self could not exist, because it doesn't exist the same as the five aggregates. So you go through each of the five aggregates and say, well, this is not the self-sufficient self, this is not the self-sufficient. You go one at a time through each of the five aggregates, and decide that it couldn't possibly be the same as the five aggregates. And then when you're talking about emptiness here, it's saying that it couldn't possibly be something completely different from the five aggregates as well. Okay, so it's neither the same nor different, and therefore there couldn't be this self-sufficient self. And so when you go through meditating on it being empty, or empty of being a separate entity from the self is empty of being a separate entity from the five aggregates, then you go through each of the five aggregates. It's not different from the first aggregate, form, feeling. You go through each of the five aggregates. Then how impurity gets in here at the third one is that then it's just understood that the aggregates are impure. Okay, and so then you say that there's no pure self that somehow the same as these impure aggregates, and there's no pure self that's somehow different from these five aggregates, and therefore this idea of a pure self-sufficient self does not exist. Okay.
Pumbu pena lu de bi chen mi sang yin ba de ko a ko do che sun ni de ba lo so she ge la ta sem da number she ba da te zu kang ga la chen mi sang se du ku ju ni do chi de lu mi sang ra shi ba de de do
ne
o chi de ko yi pumbu nga ga de dong ye ge ju ne sun da yi kyo wa ge be shi sun za mi sang a se ge do
ne
je gi ma tam je de ko we de pumbu nga sang ma gi ro chen yi li ya ko kyo wa ge ba Zangma shi de ko yili ya kawa je ru shi ya zangma ri su yora yili kyo ji be shi be shan me sa shi da ko pumbu lu me sa wa da ane pumbu nga ga shen me sa wa ra shi shen kyo ji be shi de le da de ben shen do yo ma de tong ba re shi be ka ga ni she de nga she da de de she yo ma de su yora tong shi de su yora a me ba su de nga de da ma de da ma de da ma de da ma de su
So then, when you understand we already understand how the mind, the body then is impure. So that would be the first aggregate. But then it's maybe not so clear to us how the mind is impure. The mind is impure in this second meaning of impurity that I was giving before. That it acts as a basis for us feeling, disgust or aversion or, or dislike. You could just say, because if you see something pure, then, you really like it. And whereas when you see something impure, you don't like it. So because it's produced, when we took rebirth, because it's produced by karma and afflictions, then it's an object to be disliked. So then this and the body that's impure, the body and the mind that are impure are then don't have this kind of a self-sufficient self, because that such a self could not exist the same as each of the five aggregates and go through each of the five aggregates, and then it couldn't and so that's selflessness. And then emptiness is thinking that there couldn't be some pure self over here, the self-sufficient self that's somehow totally separate and not at all connected to these five aggregates.
Sanje chumden de fedu zang tagna jidina do so tamse namne ko sera tamse namne ko le sang tele jane peme sang se do jaga de rigna ne tamse ridi be lu da ta kang ga chang shi de res dina ne tamse bomu do ne chang shi de res de she do di sanje chumden de kunju rig thomege ta ge lu de khashe rigma do lu e so 당선 대 제부도 저때 장마 다디 건주 장마 다 건주 다 거라데 또봐 근데 좀 쇼쇼비어라 디 산제 루 미자마에 맞지 거래 공부가가 좋아지게 시리 미자마 치 거래 딜레 텐션베 다 장마지 요 말에세 디 송비어라
So at the time of the Buddha, when he came into our world in India, then they had this strong belief in the caste system, where the higher castes they were considered pure, and the lower castes were considered impure, that their bodies were impure, and also their, I guess you could call it their selves, their selves, I guess you can say, were impure, whereas the higher caste, the royal and the Brahmin caste, were considered pure, their bodies pure, their selves pure, and And so we had this earlier, where one of the assertions was saying the Brahmins are, all Brahmins are pure, and Brahmanic women are the purest, and so among the pure. So then the Buddha then taught against this system of the caste, and said there is no such thing as one pure body and an impure body. Everybody's bodies are impure, and everybody's minds are objects of dislike or disgust, or however or aversion. I think is probably better. The translator here uses Ruth uses the term aversion. So then he established then that there isn't some kind of pure self that's separate from the body and mind that exists in a separate way, and it doesn't exist the same as the body and mind. And so it was generated in this in the context of the caste system. So even though we don't have the caste system nowadays, we certainly have a kind of classification of others according to whether they have white skin or dark skin or yellow skin or red skin, so then we can't think of, within that context then of and then within thinking like that, then we think of the the person, I guess, or the self as being higher or lower or not as good or something like that, and so then this meditation that the Buddha applied is useful in that context. There's really no difference here at all. Cheek too. Lock too. And one snuck in here. I was thinking there were only two. Could you elaborate on the two meanings of impurity? Why is it important to distinguish the two meanings? Dunda ni because mitangwa dunda ni yore dene dunda ni ki because di gel chewa de be di gari in a gel chewa de dunda ni yore mitangwa ni.
Niga tako lulu shinja panye to da niga keshora. Lulu misawa da tende che sonyi duga das. Lulu chakshin shuk shambuyo na. Diman doye to da misawa de kongyo na. Tene chidane koe ko lulu jibu mare kore chorwa da sem da ne da lulu tuzu ne la sobu tuzu sangma diga. Yuran do ne ko yaga ditaga degma do kyo jibe shindwa. Jibe tama chewa se jibe tama chiwa se lu chikanga. 미지베 장 동행 시망부시도와 그래서 대수 강가 코셈리아 교화제베 시를 지기도와 이전에 보면 장화시도와
Well, the reason is really just to reduce one's attachment to either the mind or the body. It's thinking of these in the context of the two impurities, that they're what do you say, the basis for dislike. We're always thinking that we're thinking of everything with attachment to our bodies and minds, and if we can see the body and the mind as being impure in this sense, then it reduces our attachment. So that's if you see them as a basis of aversion, right? It's something to be averse to. Then this helps us to reduce our attachment. There's no other reason than that. So maybe that's enough.